Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. Today we are going to talk about the different user types and roles, and we will show you how you can use them to assign the right licenses to the members of your organization. Today's agenda is as follows. We will start with a brief introduction about ArcGIS. Then we will look at the different user types and the corresponding capabilities. We will do that with the help of some slides and a demo. After that first demo, we're going to talk about roles and privileges, and we will show you with the help of a second demo how to assign and modify the different user types and roles. Over the past years and decades, Esri has developed several products. In the beginning, work was mainly done individually, so everybody was working on their own computer. Throughout the years, that focus has increasingly shifted to collaboration. That collaboration happens either in an ArcGIS Online or an ArcGIS Enterprise organization. ArcGIS Online is a SaaS, or Software as a Service, and is hosted by Esri. ArcGIS Enterprise, on the other hand, is software installed on infrastructure managed by the customer. That infrastructure can be on-premises or in a cloud environment. Such an ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise organization is the backbone of the ArcGIS system because it gives users access to numerous apps, so both web and mobile apps, as well as APIs and desktop products such as ArcGIS Pro. In the following slides, we're going to see that with the release of ArcGIS Pro in 2015, and certainly in recent years with the phasing out of ArcMap, that the focus of the licensing model has made an important shift. In the past, this focus was mainly on single-use and concurrent-use licenses, which were managed by an administrator in MyEsri. The administrator would then go into MyEsri to look up a license code or to create a license file. In the case of a single-use license, that code or file was then shared with a colleague who then used it to authorize the software on his or her computer. In the case of a concurrent use license, the license code or license file was used in ArcGIS License Manager on a central server. Once this was done, other colleagues could connect to this server and use a license from the License Manager. Important here is that for both single-use and concurrent-use licenses, that the authorization process is done through MyEsri, so it will verify that the licenses are still available and are not already in use on another device. With the shifting licensing model, ArcGIS Pro licenses are now primarily managed as named user licenses, which is done by an administrator in an ArcGIS Online or an ArcGIS Enterprise organization. The rule here is that each named user license is assigned to a single physical person. If someone tries to use ArcGIS Pro, it will be validated in ArcGIS Online or in the ArcGIS Enterprise portal whether or not access is allowed. In the case of ArcGIS Enterprise, this used to be quite complex because it required the use of ArcGIS License Manager. Fortunately, since the release of ArcGIS Enterprise 11.4, License Manager is not needed anymore, making the authorization process just as easy as in ArcGIS Online. Now, that was the example of ArcGIS Pro. But of course, there are numerous other ArcGIS products, as we can see in this slide. Just like ArcGIS Pro, access to those products is handled in an ArcGIS Online or an ArcGIS Enterprise organization, and for that we will make use of user types. We noticed, however, that we receive quite a lot of questions about everything to do with user types, with licensing, with access to apps. And indeed, there are a lot of terms and names, as we can see in this slide, and we see that sometimes they get confused with each other. So that's why we created this webinar, to bring more clarity on this topic. We're going to bring that clarity with this slide that very nicely shows that each member of an ArcGIS Online or an ArcGIS Enterprise has a particular user type and a particular role. User types work like licenses. they determine what the user can do or what the capabilities are, and they will also determine what apps the user has access to. Roles, on the other hand, determine what the user is allowed to do. So what is the user allowed to do in the apps that he has access to? What permissions or privileges does he have? So it's very important to remember that difference because our presentation is built on these two concepts. Alright, we will start with the user types. A user type is something that is always assigned when people are invited into an ArcGIS Online or an ArcGIS Enterprise organization. It is through that user type that access to the ArcGIS platform and licenses is controlled. This is done in three different ways. First, a user type is associated with an identity. So this means that each user type has its own username and password. Basically, it's an account that grants access to the ArcGIS platform and its associated systems. Second, a user type gives access to a whole range of capabilities. Those capabilities allow you to start viewing, editing, creating, analyzing, and sharing maps, apps, and other content. And finally, a user type will give access to certain apps, extensions, and content. Apps and extensions are products that you can use with ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, and ArcGIS Pro in order to extend their capabilities. The content is data managed and provided by Esri. An example of that is the Living Atlas of the World, where there are thousands of items on countless topics. In total, there are 6 different user types that we can divide into 2 major groups. On the first row, we have the core team members, with the creator, the professional, and the professional plus. These are user types that can not only create and share content, but can also be the administrator in an organization. In addition, collaborators can also be invited into the ArcGIS organization, and they can view and interact with content in a secure way, as well as make simple edits to data. These collaborators are the viewer, contributor, and mobile worker user types. So, as we have seen now, the different user types give different levels of access to the ArcGIS platform. Because of those different levels, administrators can start choosing which user types and how many user types they should add. They can do that based on their organization's preferences and needs. So actually we can say that user types are the building blocks in ArcGIS. Now we're going to look at the user types in more detail. We will start with the core team members. These are the users whose day-to-day tasks often require various advanced capabilities and apps. And they can create advanced maps, they develop apps, they perform analysis, and they manage geospatial data. A first core team member is the creator user type. Creators can create and share maps and apps. They can perform basic spatial analysis. They can access off-the-shelf data such as Living Atlas of the World. They can grant access to groups and can manage members. And they can distribute work tasks to colleagues. To do that, the creator has access to most apps such as ArcGIS dashboards, Experience Builder, field maps, and many more. And he also has access to an ArcGIS Pro basic license. Then the professional user type. He can do everything that the creator can, but on top of that he can also perform more advanced operations and data management. He can configure utility networks and parcel fabrics, and he can manage the organization's imagery and raster data. For this, the professional has access to most apps and has an ArcGIS Pro standard license, which gives access to more features than the ArcGIS Pro basic license. And then the professional plus user type. He can do everything the professional can, but he can also perform even more extensive analysis to scale up to big data. He can perform AI workflows, create his own apps using APIs and SDKs for developers, and he can use advanced 3D models. For this, he has access to all apps, an ArcGIS Pro Advanced license, and the most popular RGS Pro extensions. Now we move on to the collaborators. These are users who don't need the same level of access to the RGS platform as the core team members, and only need access to a limited number of features and apps. A first collaborator is the viewer. He is primarily assigned to people who only need to view maps and data, or only need to access dashboards. Then we have the contributors, who can do everything that the viewer user type can, but they also have the ability to edit data and collaborate with other team members. They can also use enterprise systems such as Microsoft 365 and integrate spatial data with Autodesk BIM and CAD data. And then as a last user type, we have the mobile worker, who can do everything the contributor user type can do, but they can also collect data from any location. They can securely receive work orders. They can navigate online and offline routes, and they are able to work in real time, meaning that they can have constant access to current data and also share current data with others. We are now going to show a demo that explains where you can find all this information on our website, so that you can then check for yourself what the capabilities and included apps are for each user type. In this demo, we're going to look at how you can find out what capabilities and apps are included in a particular user type. For this purpose, we're going to look at our Esri Belux website by clicking on Products, then Buy and Try ArcGIS, and then User Types. On this page you can find more information about the benefits of user types, as we can see here. And we also have an overview of the different user types that exist. Here we can see, for instance, our core team members, and below our collaborators. And as we have seen in the previous slides, the number of capabilities and the number of included apps increases each time from viewer to contributor, and then from contributor to mobile worker, to creator, to professional, and to professional plus. If you want to know more about a particular user type, we can just click on one of the links, for instance here with the mobile worker. We then see a summary of the main capabilities that are available for the mobile worker. And we also see a table that shows the capabilities of the mobile worker, but also for the contributor and the viewer user type. We can see that there are some similarities, for instance, the ability or capability to monitor dashboards and to view maps, apps, and content. So this is something that the mobile worker, the contributor, and the viewer can do. Other things like reviewing and applying simple edits, those are things that only can be done by a mobile worker and a contributor. So a viewer will not be able to do all of these capabilities. And then there are about 4 capabilities that can only be done by a mobile worker, such as navigating online and offline on routes, receiving work assignments, sharing locations, and collecting data on the field. In addition to the capabilities, the mobile worker also has access to several applications. We're not going to discuss all of these applications in detail now, but we can see from the table that for the 3 user types, mobile worker, contributor, and viewer, that they have access to more or less the same applications. And we only see a few exceptions like RGS Flights, Navigator, Quick Capture, Workforce, and so on. So it seems like there are not a lot of differences, but we must make an important note here. Just because all 3 user types have access to the same apps does not mean that they can perform the same actions with them. For example, we can see for ArcGIS Map Viewer that they are included in the mobile worker, contributor, and the viewer. But if you would go back to the capabilities, we would see that the viewer will only be able to, for instance, view the data and the maps, and that only the contributor and the mobile worker would be able to also edit the data. We can see something similar for another application like ArcGIS Field Maps. This is an application used on a mobile device in the field. And we can see that the same user types have access to this application, so the mobile worker, contributor, and the viewer. But again, if we would go back to the capabilities, we would see that only the mobile worker is able to also edit and collect data on the field. So this means that the contributor and a viewer will only be able to view data in ArcGIS Field Maps. We can also take a look at the core team members in that way. For instance, the user type with the most capabilities and applications, which is the Professional Plus user type. And we can see again a summary of the most important additions in terms of capabilities, as well as a table with all the capabilities listed for the Professional Plus user type and the other two core team members, which are the Professional and the Creator. We can see that there are quite a lot of common capabilities, as we can see here in the table, like for instance the creation and sharing of maps and apps, performance of basic analysis, coordination of colleagues who are working on site. Then there are also some capabilities that are only available with the Professional and the Professional Plus user types, like for instance managing and analyzing imagery and raster data, carrying out advanced editing operations, and performing data validation checks. And then there's also an important number of capabilities that are only available with the Professional Plus, like for instance the analysis of big data, the creation of sophisticated spatial models, or the performance of AI workflows. If we go to the product section, we will see that there is an additional part on ArcGIS Pro licenses. So starting from the June 2024 user type update, a creator user type now has access to an ArcGIS Pro Basic. A professional user type has access to ArcGIS Pro Standard. And a Professional Plus user type does not only have access to ArcGIS Pro Advanced, but also to a whole set of ArcGIS Pro extensions, like for instance 3D Analyst, Data Reviewer, and so on. And apart from all the ArcGIS Pro licenses, the three user types also have access to most of the applications, apart from some exceptions, like for instance City Engine, which is only available with a Professional and a Professional Plus, or for instance ArcGIS Urban, which is only available with a Professional Plus. Now, you may have to make a choice for a particular user type and for a particular ArcGIS Pro license level, but maybe it's not clear yet whether that should be an ArcGIS Pro Basic or a Standard or an Advanced. In that case, there is a very interesting page that you can visit. You can find it by looking for ArcGIS Pro license level. And this page will give you a list of all the functionalities and all the ArcGIS Pro license levels that are required. For instance, to create and to manage an enterprise geodatabase, you will need at least an ArcGIS Pro Standard. So an ArcGIS Pro Basic will not be sufficient. Here we even have some functionalities that are only available with an ArcGIS Pro Advanced. We also have a summary table for the various geoprocessing tools in ArcGIS Pro. It's actually very easy to read, and an empty cell means that there are no tools available with this license level. For instance, an ArcGIS Pro Basic and an ArcGIS Pro Standard will not give access to the tools of the GeoAI toolbox. Then one box means that there is at least one or some tools available with this license type. For instance, an ArcGIS Pro Basic will give access to one or more cartography tools. Then two boxes, that means that the tools of ArcGIS Pro Basic are available, plus some additional tools. And three boxes then means that all tools are available with this license level. For instance, with an ArcGIS Pro Advanced, you will have access to all cartography tools. When we look at the table, we can actually see that with ArcGIS Pro Advanced, you will have access to all tools of the toolboxes in this table. We can also look into detail. For instance, with the cartography toolbox, we can indeed confirm that with an ArcGIS Pro Advanced license level, that we will have access to all of the tools in this toolbox. Alright, now that we have looked at the user types, we return to our overview. As we just saw, each member of an ArcGIS Online or an ArcGIS Enterprise organization has a certain user type and a certain role. We had also already seen that the different user types control the things that a user can do and what apps he has access to. Roles, on the other hand, control what the users are allowed to do. So what is a user allowed to do in the apps he has access to? What privileges does he have? This is something we will discuss in the following slides. Basically, an administrator can decide in great detail for each member of the organization which privileges that person gets. Because there are over 70 different privileges, Esri provided 6 default roles, each containing a set of privileges. These roles are the viewer, the data editor, the user, the publisher, the facilitator, and the administrator. In addition to those default roles, the administrator can also choose to create custom roles by creating his own set of privileges. In any case, it will always be possible for the administrator to modify or change the roles and privileges that were initially granted, as long as at least one administrator remains in the organization. Here we can see again the 6 default roles. We can also see what privileges are assigned to them. The viewer, for instance, only has privileges to view items like maps, apps, dashboards, and so on. So he's allowed to view all kinds of items that are publicly shared or shared with him by other users. Then we have data editors. So in addition to viewing items, they are also allowed to edit features that were shared with them by others. Next, we have the user role. In addition to the privileges of a data editor, the user is allowed to create groups, maps, and apps. Then we have the publisher role. He does not only have access to the privileges of the user role, but is also allowed to publish hosted web layers and perform analysis. Furthermore, we have the facilitator. The facilitator has the same permissions as the publisher role, plus the ability to create and manage a special type of groups, more precisely the partnered collaboration groups. In this type of groups, not only members of the own organization can be invited, but also external members. So this makes it possible to share content with other organizations. And finally, there is the administrator role. This has the same privileges as a facilitator and is also allowed to manage the organization and its members. Now the question arises, what are actually the possible combination of user types and roles? Can any user type just get any role? To answer this question, we have summarized the possible combination in this table. On the left, we see the different user types, and at the top of the columns, we see the different roles. For example, basically any user type can get a viewer role. Of course, with most user types, this will prevent many capabilities from being used. And so in practice, we will see that administrators give this viewer role mainly to a viewer user type. The data editor role, as you can see here in the second column, can be assigned to almost any user type except from the viewer user type. It is often the case that contributor and mobile worker user types are given a data editor role, because in that case the capabilities of these user types can still be fully utilized. The other roles, so the user, publisher, facilitator, and administrator, can only be assigned to core team members, so the creator, professional, and professional plus user types. As for the administrator role and the core team members, I want to make an important remark. We had seen earlier in the presentations that any RGS Online or any RGS Enterprise organization always needs at least one administrator. So therefore, if we then look at the table here, we also know that an organization must have at least one creator or one professional or one professional plus user type. That was the theory about the member roles. Now you may be wondering how this all works practically. Where and how can I assign or modify user types and roles? And where do I get an overview of my licenses? These are all things we will now look at in the next demo. In this demo, we're going to look at how we can change user types, member roles, and licenses in our organization. To do this, we're going to visit rgs.com because we're going to use an RGS Online organization. But of course, many of the things we will see in this demo today can also be applied with an RGS Enterprise organization. At the top of the page, we have the Organization tab. So this is the tab that you will need to access when managing user types, roles, and licenses. In our case, we have 5 different tabs in the blue ribbon. That's because we have an administrator role. If you would have another role, you would only be able to see the Overview tab and the Members tab. As an administrator, in the Overview tab, we can find information about the organization, about the total amount of credits and the credit usage. We also have information about the members and about the licenses in the organization. If you go back to the top to the Members tab, we can see an overview of all members in the organization. Again, we can see certain things that would not be visible without an administrator role, such as the number of credits that were assigned initially to the member, as well as the remaining amount of credits. We can also see the last login date of the member, the user type that has been assigned, and the role that has been assigned. For example, the account that we are currently signed in with has a creator user type and has an administrator role assigned. That administrator role is possible because this user type is one of the 3 core team members, creator, professional, or a professional plus. So you will only be able to assign administrator role when using one of these 3 user types. As we can see here, this creator has an administrator role, this professional user type also has an administrator role, and the same applies for this professional plus user type. We can look for another example further down. For instance, the Esri Belux student member, which has a viewer user type and a viewer role. As we have seen in the slides, the only compatible default role in this case will also be a viewer, so we cannot choose any other role. If you want to change the user type, you can just click on the viewer user type and then a new window will open. Here we see the current user type and also the available amount of viewer user types in the organization. More to the right, we can see which roles we can assign to this user type. And as we have seen in the slides, it can only be a viewer. If we want to change the user type, for instance, to a contributor, we now see again the available amount of contributor user types in the organization. Based on the information in the slides, we would expect that there would be 2 compatible roles, the viewer and the data editor, but in this case we see that there are 3 compatible roles. And there is an additional role called the editor. So that's because we don't only have default roles, but also a custom role. And this editor role was created in the past, meaning that we have now 2 default roles, the data editor and the viewer, and also 1 custom role, which is the editor. So in our case, we will now select a role, which will be the data editor. If you would choose another user type, for instance, let's take a mobile worker, we see again the same compatible roles and again the same default roles, data editor and viewer. That's not really a surprise because we had already seen in the slides that the data editor is the highest possible role for both a contributor and a mobile worker user type. If we start looking at the core team members, for instance, let's take a creator user type, then we see that there are again a lot of additional compatible roles available. Some of them are the default roles. According to the information in the slides, a creator can be a viewer, a data editor, a user, a publisher, a facilitator, or an administrator. And here we see, in addition to these 6 default roles, that there are also 4 custom roles. The editor that we already discussed earlier, and 3 custom publisher roles. If you want to learn more about the existing custom roles, or if you want to create a new role ourselves, we can do this as an administrator by going to the Settings tab and then clicking on Member Roles. And here we see a list of all roles, both default roles and custom roles. And we can also see how many times they have been assigned to a member of the organization. The custom roles also have 3 dots where you can edit or delete the role. We can also add a new custom role by clicking on the Create Role button. We will give a name and a description. And then we can decide whether or not we want to change the privilege compatibility. In our case, the View, Edit, Create and Manage option is selected. So this means that the new role will be compatible with all user types that have these capabilities, meaning that the new role will be compatible with the Creator, the Professional and the Professional Plus. If you would decide to change this option to View and Edit, then the new role would be compatible with all user types that are able to view and edit, like the contributor, the mobile worker, and all core team members. Of course, this will have an impact on the privileges that we can select. For instance, if we go to Content, we see multiple privileges about the creation of new layers, but if you want to enable them, we see that this is not possible. And this has all to do with the option that we selected here. The new role has to be compatible with all user types that are able to view and edit. And if the new role would be able to create new layers, it would not be compatible with the contributor and the mobile worker. If you would set this option back to the initial value, then we see that we can enable these privileges. But of course, if you would start from scratch and had to enable each privilege individually, that would take a lot of time and effort. If we would have a look at all the available privileges, we see that there are 73 privileges in total. So in order to avoid a lot of work, we can also already import the privileges from another role. If we click on Set from Existing Role, we can, for instance, choose to import the privileges from a publisher role. We can import these settings and we see that at this moment 27 privileges have been enabled, and from there on we can continue to enable and disable certain privileges. We can now save the role and we can see that the custom demo role has been created. And we can then assign the new role to one of our members. For instance, to the Esri Belux student, we will first have to change the user type to a compatible user type, like for instance the creator, and then assign the demo role, save. And now we see that Esri Belux student has a creator user type with the custom demo role. Okay, we will now have a look at the licenses. And this brings us to the add-on licenses. Add-on licenses are licenses that can be added to a member with a particular user type. And on this page you can see all the add-on licenses that are included in our RGS Online organization. You can also verify for each individual add-on license how many of them have already been assigned to the members, how many of them are still available, and we can also check the total amount of each individual add-on license. I would like to mention for RGS Pro add-on licenses, so for Basic, Standard and Advanced, these are not being sold anymore as add-on licenses, so if you would like to assign RGS Pro in your RGS Online or RGS Enterprise organization, you will have to do this by using user types. Further down we see the RGS Pro extensions. Contrary to the RGS Pro add-on licenses, the extensions will still be sold separately as add-on licenses. In the list we can see both extensions that are already included with the Professional Plus user type, like for instance the 3D Analyst or the Data Reviewer. And we can also see extensions that are not included with the Professional Plus, like for instance aviation airports, aviation charting, bathymetry. We can also verify this by checking the compatible user types. For instance, for the 3D Analyst, we can see that the Creator and Professional user types are compatible with 3D Analyst, but that Professional Plus is not in the list. That's because 3D Analyst is already included in a Professional Plus, so we cannot reassign this extension again. We also see that there is an advanced user type. That's something that we will discuss later during this demo. If we go to another extension, for instance aviation airports, we will see that Professional Plus is included this time. That's because aviation airports is not yet included in the Professional Plus user type. And then further down the page we can see other applications than ArcGIS Pro that can also be assigned to the members of our organization. Okay, let's go back up and have a look at the user types. Here we have a list of all the user types in our organization. In our case, there are also some user types that we haven't discussed before. That's because they have been purchased to work with very specific products. For instance, the indoors user. This user type gives us access to various RGS indoors licenses. And then the advanced user type, which gives us access to the RGS Runtime Advanced. But apart from these very specific user types, we see our 6 default user types: and the Viewer, Contributor, Mobile Worker, Creator, Professional and Professional Plus. And as was the case with the licenses, we can also see again the amount of user types that have already been assigned to our members, the amount of available user types, and the total amount of each specific user type. This page can be very interesting for administrators to check which licenses are included with each user type. For instance, for a creator we can see that an RGS Pro Basic license is included, as well as numerous apps which are divided into different categories, like for instance the essential apps with many well-known web apps like ArcGIS Dashboards, Experience Builder, RGS Hub, Instant Apps and so on. There's also the field apps with RGS Field Maps, Quick Capture, Survey 123 and Workforce. We also have the Office apps, so these are apps that are used with Microsoft products such as Power Automate, Excel, Power BI, SharePoint and Teams. And then there are also some standalone apps like RGS Business Analyst, Data Pipelines, Excalibur and many more. One of them is actually pretty interesting, the RGS Web Editor. This is an application that was released in June 2024. It's a bit similar to RGS Map Viewer, but with RGS Web Editor the emphasis, as the name already implies, is on editing data. There are still quite some similarities to map viewers, so the interface will still feel familiar. Many of these included apps are web apps, so therefore we will also find these applications in the app launcher, as we can see here. In addition, we can also see which licenses are compatible with a creator user type. We can do this by clicking on compatible add-on licenses. Let's say we have a creator user type and we want to work with ArcGIS Insights, then we can see here that it is indeed possible to buy an ArcGIS Insights add-on license and assign it to a member with a creator user type. If we check the same for, let's say, a mobile worker, then we see that ArcGIS Insights is not included. And if we go to the compatible add-on licenses, we see that it cannot be added as an add-on license. So it's not possible to use ArcGIS Insights with a mobile worker. Now, I know that my account at this moment has a creator user type. So I know that ArcGIS Insights is not automatically included. I can confirm this by going to the app launcher, and indeed we see ArcGIS Insights, but the icon is missing, and if I try to click on it, the application will not open. So in order for me to be able to use ArcGIS Insights, I will have to add an add-on license. To do that, I can either go to add-on licenses and then look for ArcGIS Insights, click on manage, and here I can assign the application or the license to my account. Another way to do this is by going to the Members tab. And then next to my account we have the three dots. I go for add-on licenses. I check ArcGIS Insights and save the changes, and then refresh the page. And now I will be able to open ArcGIS Insights. So that was the second demo. We now return to our overview one last time to summarize the things we have seen today. So first of all, each member of an ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise organization is assigned both a user type and a member role. The user type determines what the user can do because it grants access to certain apps and capabilities. The 6 user types are the viewer, contributor, mobile worker, creator, professional, and professional plus. And then there is the member role. It will determine what the user is allowed to do in these applications and what privileges he will get. This role is determined by the administrators of the organization, where they can choose to put together their own set of privileges by creating a custom role, or choose one of the 6 standard roles: the viewer, the data editor, the user, the publisher, the facilitator, or the administrator. Good, that brings us to the end of the webinar. Before concluding, I want to provide you with the following documentation. The first QR code will take you to our Esri Belux website, and more precisely the section on user types that we had seen in the first demo. The second QR code will take you to the page about ArcGIS Pro license levels, where you can find all functionalities and tools that are associated to a certain license level. This is documentation we also discussed in the first demo. And then the third QR code will take you to a general page about user types, roles, and privileges, from where you can continue your search for further information. If you should have any questions after watching this webinar, then you can find the contact information of our support department on our website. In case of questions about your current licenses or contract, you can also contact your account manager or send an email to solutions@esribelux.com.